Welcome everyone, and this evening's topic is being presented by myself, Bill WT0DX and Paul NO0T, and we're here to talk about remote stations. And we gave the same presentation a couple weeks ago. I went back and looked at it, and I had a whole bunch of things to update because there's a lot going on in the remote station space. And as every month passes, something else, interesting occurs or new products come out. So it's a very active and interesting space right now. So what are we going to talk about? Just a little bit about our backgrounds, particularly focused on our remote station activities. I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might have a remote station, some options for setting up remote stations, how you get started. We got some operating tricks, and then we'll talk in pretty good detail about our remote stations. And then afterwards, we'll be able to demonstrate our stations. And also, I will point out that there is an extensive appendix to this presentation that basically has links to everything that we're going to talk about in it. And we'll put this presentation up in the files section of the groups.io website. This is a picture of Paul, by the way, operating his station remotely from a vacation home that we rented in Crested Butte, Colorado.
Great Lakes, right?
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that outing that we did and some of the fun we had operating our remote stations there. So a little bit about my background. Been licensed since 1968. Operated, as you can see, in a number of different places across the country. When we moved back to Colorado about 10 years ago, we moved to Evergreen, Colorado. I had a nice house there with no homeowners association. And last 2 years or so, we thought about moving from Evergreen down to where we are now, which is in the Aurora Parker area. And I was pretty sure I was not going to be able to set up, a very good station at my house. So I started looking into remote stations, and I also met Paul, and he had a remote station. So we kind of, worked each other into a frenzy about remote stations. My first effort in doing that was in 2018. I set up a little remote station at my son's house in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And then in June 2019, it's almost been 2 years now, I was able to coordinate with a local ham and set up a remote station at his house. The antennas that you see in this picture are from that remote station that's located here in the Denver area. And then, as I mentioned, we moved to the Aurora area in June, just about a year ago. I have a total of over 14,000 remote contacts. Quite a few of those are from contests that both Paul and I operated in, but obviously also a lot of standalone operating. So Paul, up to you. And Paul, you're on mute.
I just, had to find my cursor. Anyway, NO0T, we licensed back in '64, so that makes me old, but not as old as some of these guys on here. And I was a Canadian VE3 FIB. Then I moved to Minneapolis and got my extra class license there. And we've been bouncing around from various states and ended up in Parker in the year 2000. And that then we eventually moved to downtown where we currently reside. But since I moved, of course, I wasn't really, I didn't have any operations. But I finally, my daughter bought a place downtown. I said, oh, great, maybe I can put an antenna there. So I managed to talk her into letting me put a station there. And then eventually I figured, well, why bother her? Every time I want to come over there, I just decided to set up a remote. And we've been kind of like adding to that all the way along here. And I've got well over 5,000, almost 6,000 contacts so far. A couple of contests, but most of it just on 6 meters and 40 meters. So it's been pretty good. Next slide. So why this is for you, right?
Yeah, I'll
Bill,
take it from here.
You got the control.
Yeah. So, you know, again, a few comments on why we have remote stations, but there's actually quite a few different reasons that people set up remote stations. One of the first actually is remote access of your home station, but it could be within your house. Some folks have a station in the basement and they like to go, you know, upstairs and operate, or maybe operate from the back porch on a nice day. So some people just do remote station operation within their house. Other folks do it on their property. They might have their ham station out in an outbuilding. Wintertime might not be the most comfortable place to be, so they set up a remote operation back to their main house, or obviously operating from a completely different location. Turning that around a little bit, you know, you might be at home, but you want to have remote access of another station. It could be that you've got a second location, maybe it's a vacation home, and you've set up a station there. You might want to operate a friend's station. Something we've seen a lot during the pandemic is that the multi-operator stations, where you couldn't, you know, join with your fellow operators, are opening up and operating remote so that you can be a contest operator without being at the station. And then there's also a remote access of what I would call super stations, and we'll talk a little bit about that and why people sometimes connect to these super stations. Of course, again, some folks can't operate at home due to the homeowner or CCR restrictions. That's my case, for example, right now, and Paul's case also. Or unfortunately, a growing issue with local noise. You know, maybe it's the solar panels or LED lights or something else. But as we all know, for any of us that live in, you know, out anywhere near the city, the noise levels just keep going up and it's a constant battle. Other things are that you can operate while traveling or at a vacation home. And then last but not least, it's a pretty cool thing to impress your friends with. That's probably the least of the benefits, but it's still fun to do sometimes. So we're going to talk about 4 different ways to implement a remote station. There's some that you can just access through a web browser. Others are where specific software programs or maybe some helper hardware helps you connect to a station. There's also a technique which is a remote front panel technique, which is supported by a number of companies. And then what we call the remote desktop, which is actually what Paul and I do, and we'll spend, you know, more details talking about that. So let's start with web browser access. Well, probably the most famous set of stations you can operate is remote ham radio. They have 20 plus stations around the country, or actually around North America, 40 plus towers and 200 plus antennas. They claim also that their station in Maine, I think it's located in Maine, is the closest station to Europe in the continental United States. Just kind of an interesting fact of where it's located. It's a subscription service. So you can access a set of the stations for $99 a year, plus you pay you know, so many cents per minute when you're operating. And you can access all their stations, and some, including what I would call some of their super stations, for $1,000 a year. You access it using a Chrome web browser, an Android phone, a Chromebook, iPhone app, and also a Flex Maestro, because they're now converting over from the original set of radios to Flex radios. And, you know, on the surface here, this looks pretty expensive for sure. But for people that have modest stations and want to, you know, have a killer set up for a contest, or maybe work that special D expedition, which their dipole antenna is not going to let them work. You can get on, you know, and in 15 minutes probably from any of these stations, you can probably work, you know, just about any D expedition that has favorable propagation at the time. So there's certainly some reasons to do that. Other people, you know, have decided they don't want to invest in any ham radio equipment at all. They don't want to spend the tens of thousands of dollars to set stuff up. And they've said, look, I'll pay $1,000 a year to have access to these amazing stations. So again, it's a personal choice, but it's an interesting option. This is just a screen capture of both, I think, the smartphone app on the right and then the web browser on the left. It's all custom software that they've written to do this. It's very nice. It shows you things like in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the antenna pattern for the beam that you happen to be on from this station. They have spots. You can operate all modes, sideband, CW, digital. And again, you can even operate using your phone if you're so interested. These guys have been around for a number of years. I don't know how many subscribers they have, but they keep building more stations and upgrading their stations. The next option is to use some of the software programs that are available that are meant for remote operation. And these, you know, connect to your equipment. Depends on, you know, what equipment you have and also your, you know, personal preference. Ham Radio Deluxe, which of course is widely used, does have a remote operation capability. So it's popular. Also, if you have ICOM Yaesu or K3 from Elecraft, there's some very nice software which I use, which is the Win for ICOM suite. It's a full-featured radio control. It includes an audio server, which means you can have two-way audio from your remote station back to wherever you're operating. You've got a spectrum display. It has a built-in CW keyer, and it interfaces nicely to other software. So I'll talk some more about that later. There's something called remotehands.com. Again, some software that you set up, N4PY. For those of you that have the more modern ICOM radios, you may be familiar with their RSBA1 product, which is software that connects to a server. And the 7610 actually has a built-in server. ICOM 7610 has a built-in server. So again, you can sort of see the evolution there. Brand new, there's two interesting things. Yaesu has just put out kind of a piece of hardware to interface remote operation for the newer Yaesu radio. So it's a piece of hardware you connect to your radio, and then you run software on the other end. And then it's not exactly on topic, but this is very interesting. There's something that just came out called Cat Sync. And what it allows you to do is to basically synchronize or slave any of the public web SDRs, and there's quite a few of them that you can connect to your radio. So as you turn the knob on your radio, it tunes the receiver on this remote radio. So it gives you a remote receive capability, which, you know, might be handy again for certain kinds of activities. I mean, you know, there's rules and contests that don't allow this, but for general operation, it's a rather clever thing that has just come into the market. Everything I've mentioned here and all, you know, and other items are all covered in the appendix. There's links there where you can click on and go immediately to, you know, get more information. And here's an example of what some of these remote radio screens look like. They're actually quite nice. We've got, I think we've got the ICOM in the upper right, RSBA1. We've got a Yaesu one there. And then the lower right is actually the one I use, which is for my ICOM 7600. And what's interesting about these interfaces is in some cases, they actually have more buttons and controls on the interface than you have on your radio. So it's gotten to the point, Paul and I laugh about the fact that because we only access our radios through these software screens, if we actually sat in front of the radio, sometimes we wouldn't know what button to press or how to, change the power level or something like that, right? We've gotten so used to working through these interfaces. Remote front panels. This is the kind of the third option. And this works with radios where you can split or pull off the front panel and then leave the rest of the radio. And these two devices here, the remote rig, you put one at the radio and one at your local operating site. These have been around for quite a few years. They work very well, and they're dedicated for this specific purpose. I'm going to show you a diagram here in a second. They cost around $500 for a pair of these modems, I'll call them. So on the right, you see, the remote station. You've got your base radio without the front panel. You might have your amplifier, rotator, maybe some antenna switches and things. All of that's connected through the interface over the internet to another interface that is where you're sitting. And you actually physically have your front panel there, which you plug in. You get a speaker, a microphone, a CW paddle. It's like having the radio really sitting right in front of you there. And this works very well. I know some other folks here in the Denver area that have operated using this configuration. Also, of course, the Flex radio has got very nice remote operating capability. You've got your Maestro front panel, which you can operate separately from the base station. And also the new Multiop K4 radio is going to have a lot of sort of similar functionality, being able to control, a radio in one location from a radio in another location, or just run a software package to control your remote radio. So some of the very high-end radios are, again, incorporating remote station functionality into them. So let's talk about remote desktop. This is what the technique that Paul and I, are using, sorry. So how does it work? Well, first of all, you're going to need, where your station is located, where your equipment's located, you're going to need a computer that you will use to access all that equipment. And you can use all your favorite software, logging programs, rig control programs, even if they don't have inherently any remote capability. Then you use a remote desktop program to connect that computer to whatever you're using, at your operating location. And what you'll do is you'll see this shack computer as if it's right in front of you, and you can operate all your equipment accordingly. A number of programs are available for these remote desktop programs. Probably a lot of you have heard about TeamViewer. We don't recommend that anymore because they've gotten rather strict about how they classify personal use. And quite honestly, what we do apparently, for some reason, trips the trigger that they have to where they think it's a professional use. But there's lots of nice choices. AnyDesk is a great program. Paul and I use that. We also use a program called Splash. AnyDesk, by the way, is free. We use Splashtop and we pay a modest annual fee for that. And there's some features that we like about it. There's also Google has a product called Chrome Remote Desktop. There's Windows Remote Desktop, and there's Real VNC. And again, most of these are free, and they do a great job, if you have a reasonable internet connection, of reproducing the screens that you would normally see at the station at your remote location. Here, you'll see this station later, but this is actually how I normally have my remote station set up. I've got two monitors, this one on the left, and then this one on the right. And I reproduce that on two monitors here at my house where I operate from. And the fidelity of the screen reproduction is amazing with these programs. It's literally indistinguishable from sitting right in front of a similar monitor hooked to the computer at the station. So you don't feel, you know, somehow disconnected from what's going on there. So how would you set this up? What kind of equipment do you need? Well, your transceiver needs to have computer control. You're going to be wanting to control all its various functions. You're going to need an audio interface so that you can hear what's going on the radio, or in the case of sideband or maybe some of the digital modes, actually, you know, transmit audio back to the radio. If you're going to do CW, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but if you want to literally have a key in front of you, then you're probably going to need, you know, to use some interface electronics, particularly micro key or remote. Is that the right? I think that's the right name, Paul. But yeah, anyway, we have information on that in the appendix. This PC that you're going to have in the shack, which is going to be connected to your computer, the one thing that you have to do to it is you have to go into the BIOS and set it up so that it will fully boot up on a power up sequence, because you're not going to be there to type in any passwords or, you know, anything else to start the computer up. So it does need to have that boot up on power. And you know, it helps if you've got a fairly decent computer with a good video functionality in it. One of the key elements of being successful here is you have to have remote power control. You have to be able to power your equipment up and down remotely, both because it's sort of an obvious thing to do, and secondly, because, you know, computers will sometimes go sideways for whatever reason, or a piece of software might crash and freeze your computer, and you need to be able to fully reboot the computer remotely. So we use Wi-Fi controlled AC outlets. They work great. You can buy some name brand, very reliable Wi-Fi AC outlets for about $10 each now. So it's not an expensive thing. Again, I have some suggestions in the appendix. And obviously for this all to work, you have to have a good internet connection. It doesn't have to be great. It has to be good. And we'll talk about how good it has to be in a few minutes. But think about it. What you're doing at the remote station is you're uploading to the internet. You'll normally talk about, you know, your download speeds, right? Can I stream 5, you know, things at the same time? Well, in this case, from the remote station's point of view, it's the upload that matters, because you're uploading all the screens to the device that you're sitting in front of. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What kind of software are you going to need? Well, you're going to need software that controls your radio. You may need some other operating software. Audio link, because you're going to want to hear, obviously, your radio. You may want a digital voice keyer, for example, for contests. There's CW interface. You're going to want software if you have an amplifier that lets you control your amplifier using software. Same thing if you have an antenna tuner. You need software that, you know, is compatible with that. And if you have a separate antenna switch, separate from just switching the inputs on your radio, you're going to need software for that. And obviously, if you have rotators, you're going to want to be able to have software access to that. Again, depending on the equipment you have, this is either readily accessible from the manufacturer, or sometimes a third party has written software to control your devices. And obviously, you need to have more modern devices in general for this to be the case. So how do you get started? Well, first thing is determine how you're going to interface your equipment to the computer. Select the software you want to use. Determine your power control technique. You may have to do a little bit of configuration, internet configuration of some routers or firewalls, you know, involved with the locations. Certainly, first way that I even started trying experimenting with remote station was I did it all in my house, all in my local area network. So I didn't have to deal with, you know, talking to the outside world. And maybe one of the most important things, Paul and I have learned this the hard way, is if you know someone who's done this before, it's great to work with them, even remotely. It doesn't have to be someone sitting there right with you, just because some of these programs, you have to know little tricks on setting them up, and you might have, again, some internet things that you need to adjust. And it's just great to have someone that will say, well, did you look at this and did you try that? And, you know, here, let me try it for my house, and that sort of stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about internet latency and routers. So you need a good connection. You know, I'm going to say a couple megabits is adequate. You don't need, you know, so if you give an internet service that's reported to be like 25 megabits or something, you're going to be in fine shape. One of the things that some people have done is, in addition to the AC controllers that I talked about previously, they have something called an internet-enabled remote power switch with a reboot. And the little picture here on the right is one such device, which you can buy from Amazon for about $70. What does it do? Well, it's a power switch that you can remotely cycle on and off from an application on your phone. But more important than that, this power switch constantly monitors your internet connection. And if it detects that it no longer has an internet connection, it will power cycle. Well, why do you want that? Well, you might want to plug your cable modem or your Wi-Fi adapter or access point into this, so that if for some reason the equipment that provides your internet service locks up or you know, has an issue, when you hook up and use this device, it will power cycle all that equipment, which often is all it takes to get things started again. Paul and I know a ham up in Ontario who has a nice remote station at a vacation home that's, I don't know, a couple hours drive from his house. And one time his internet stopped working. He called up the internet service provider and said, hey, how come my internet isn't working? And they said, oh, we downloaded a new version of software to your cable modem, and it won't work again till you power cycle it. So he had to drive a couple hours to just go flip the power switch on the modem that was no longer responding. So this is a nice belts and suspenders kind of solution. In terms of latency, you know, you think about it, right? You know, if there's anything that I've listed here that, you know, adds more latency than you might want, you might think about using a different approach. I think what we found is, yes, there is some latency. Depending on the operating mode, you might notice it. For example, when I'm operating sideband, I do not listen to the monitor output coming back from my radio, because obviously it's delayed and just drives me crazy. But even in a contest situation, the latency, you know, of switching back and forth and just the audio paths in both directions has not proven to be any significant issue for me. Routers. So you might have to open some ports for your remote software. Kind of depends on how it's set up and how it works. You probably will, as you install some of these applications, you know, they might request to open up some ports or other things in your Windows firewall. And again, on a lot of this stuff, someone who's done it before, or, you know, Google is your friend when it comes to, you know, setting certain things up. You know, we've been able to work through everything that we needed to do at several locations now, and I think, you know, a little bit of patience, you know, anybody can do it. So some operating tricks. So I'd say start simple, you know, control your transceiver remotely, then add more devices. You might try a digital mode first, just because it might be simpler to set up and operate than CW or sideband. You'll see when I show my remote station, I have about 8 pieces of software that I have to start up every time I start the station. Gets a little bit tiresome, you know, finding all those 8 icons and clicking on them every time I want to start the station. So I use a macro recorder such as Tiny Task, which is free, to start up and shut down all my software. And again, I'll come back to make sure you have the AC power control solution. Again, your computer or software might freeze. You might need to restart your transceiver again, or some other piece of hardware that for some reason got discombobulated. And obviously you want to be able to power down during storms. The little image on the right there actually is something that Paul built, because while most of our equipment operates on 120 volts, his amplifier runs on 220, and he wanted to be able to switch, totally switch the power on and off to the amplifier. So he built a little device that I'll let him chat about when we get into his section there. So again, for CW, check out WinKey or Remote, and also K6 UFO is a big time remote station operator. He's got a huge amount of presentations and articles and other things on his QRZ and web page. And he has lots of, again, tips and tricks on what you might want to do. So Paul, it's up to you. Let's talk about your remote station.
Okay, Bill, that's great. Good report so far. So basically, my station's set up at my daughter's place in near Sloan's Lake, which is in Denver here, downtown Denver, and managed to get permission to put up two of these LFA antennas, the 6-element 6-meter beams, and I also was able to put up a couple of dipoles at about 25 feet. Not very big, but I had a very limited amount of space to put stuff on, and the roof is very, very small. Right now I've got a not too old, but still somewhat old, ICOM 756 Pro 3. Luckily, it had a good connection with CAT, and I've discovered that SDRs are really super from some of the folks here in Colorado, and on a couple of their recommendations, I got the AirSpy R2 and the HF Discovery. Those are awesome receivers, and much more sensitive and better selectivity than the 756. So I use those 756 just as a transmitter, and I have a little switching device that Paul N2EME put together, which allowed me to switch the SDR in and out of the transmit circuit so that it wouldn't hurt any of the equipment or my preamp. And I also have a PALSTAR LA1K, and I've got an interface to that, as well as a high gain tail twister, which I got a card from Ham Supply, your Easy RS232 board that goes inside those, so you can actually retrofit some of your older rotators without having to go out and buy anything expensive. Software-wise, I'm just using a Windows 10 computer. By the way, you don't have to spend a lot of money on a computer. Paul N2EME told me that if I go on to, in this case, Newegg, they've got these rebuilt computers that are like Livono desktops for anywhere from $150 up to about $300, and they work great. And they're, you get the computer, you don't get any monitors or keyboards or anything like that, but you got the basic unit. Sometimes, if you buy something for $300, you'll get the extra keyboard and a few other things. But it's excellent for a remote station, and not a lot of money. The other thing I have is I've discovered is this thing called Node-RED. I was really lucky to find out about it, and I had some, again, some buddies that I got to know. Dave NO0T and Alan WA9WUD were able to help me get that set up. And it's just it's another free piece of software out there, but it allows you to create icons. I needed to get an icon for my LA1K that was on my screen that allowed me to monitor all the specifics that are going on with the amplifier, the temperature, the current, the voltage, etc., as well as how much power I'm putting out and what my SWR is. And it works out great. I'll show you a picture of that later. I also have some logging software which is integrated with the station, and also using Ham Radio Deluxe, JT Alert, WSJT for my digital, and SDR console to manage the 2 SDRs that I have. Luckily, my daughter's location was relatively some new construction in Denver, and CenturyLink was putting fiber to the home right behind it, and had a special deal where they give you the modem and a very good rate, unlimited data at 1 gig up and down. So I was quite happy with that. And our building that I'm in has WebPass, which is a Google company, and they also have 1 gig service. So I have a very fast internet here, but I could get by with probably DSL if I wanted to. Splashtop Business is a version of your Splashtop software. And the nice thing about it is it allows you to run multiple monitors at the same time. Right now I'm running 2. I think eventually once I get a chance, I might want to see if I can get it to run 4 monitors. But it's really, really great. And AnyDesk is another piece of software with that Bill and I use. So when we're running Multiop, I'll connect to his station with AnyDesk, and he's using Splashtop Business, and so we got 2 guys actually using the same Multiop station at the same time. I can look over his shoulder and see what he's doing. So it's kind of cool. Great for Multiop, and something we'd like to keep on doing. For the Wi-Fi remote, I'm using those little AC power controls, which are basically a web tool, which I can control with my phone, and by doing it, I can control up to 4 different devices very easily. I'll just show you what they look like here in a second. There we go, and here's an example of what it looks like. I don't know if you can see that on on the screen, but that's what it gives me. Just touch the button and away it goes. And also a 220 volt power relay. I went out to one of the local electrical stores, and I bought one of their single throw double pole switch, and it runs on 110 volts, which is great. It runs on 110 volts, so I run that to my my little web switch, and when it puts 110 on it, it closes the contacts for the 220 circuit into the amplifier. So not very sophisticated, very, very basic. Just buy a box and a relay, and that's it, and some wire. Next one, Bill. Thank you. So this is a shot of what my operating station here looks like. I actually have 2 more monitors above those 2, but it's very convenient. I'm using the WinKeyer USB remote capability so that I can key the radio at the remote station. I also use like a keyboard for operating CW. See, the nice thing about the keyboard is you don't have to worry about the side tone. When I'm using my paddle, the USB or the WinKeyer at my home here has a little side tone, and so I kind of like don't listen to the side tone coming back from the receiver. At the remote site, I just listen to the side tone here. It works out fine for sideband. For SSB, I've got a headset which I plug into the computer here, and it works just great. I'm using this REMAUD, REMAUD software for the voice control, as well as my foot switch. So I have a foot switch here at my condo. When I push that down, it instantly keys the radio over at my daughter's place. So it's wonderful stuff.
Hey, Paul, I was just looking carefully at the screens here that you're showing, and I realized that this is from one of our multi-op operations.
Oh,
actually. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes.
Great eyes. This is what I have over at my daughter's place, is the ICOM, and Bob and Bill's right. I mean, I went over there the other day and was trying to do something with the 756, and I had absolutely no idea how to turn it on or how to adjust or how to do anything. If you look at, well, I could show you maybe later the rig control I have here, and all the different sliders and all the different controls. Everything is brought out onto this one screen, so that if you want to be able to adjust your break-in delay or your mic gain or your RF power, or the brightness of the screen, or anything like that, you can all do it remotely. It's just wonderful. Anyway, you can see my antennas there on the left, top left, as well as one of the SDRs I've got. And I'm not going to go through everything on the screen, but you can see how I managed to pull all that stuff together. It's just a little bit of a block diagram, but it's pretty simple. It has to be simple because I'm not very complicated. I need something that's very simple to put together and very inexpensive as far as the infrastructure that I had to put together. And this is what the hardware looks like at the station. And like I say, you don't have to have monitors. You got these little plugs you can buy that plug into the monitor output of the computer, because the computer won't work unless has a monitor. So they have these dummy monitors plugs which you can put in and they're like high resolution things. And so that when it outputs back to me, I've got a very high resolution monitor here at my home, and it works perfectly. I don't need anything else. I got the keyboard there just in case I need to access the keyboard. And when I go over to my daughter's place, I usually take my phone, or I could take a laptop computer, and that'll be my interface to the radios. I actually don't touch anything that's on the front of the radio. I know it's hard to believe, but I've just forgotten how to use all that stuff, as well as forgetting how to start up a Zoom meeting on time. I've operated from all kinds of places, and the delay is not significant. I mean, I've been in the Bahamas there with some friends of mine, or sat at the pool with a I actually used I think it was my wife's Kindle, and I was able to get on there. The other thing is, it's really great is when you're shopping with your XYL, and you're in a mall and she's going off and looking at all kinds of stuff, you can sit down in the chair there and you can operate your radio perfectly from in a mall. As long as you've got either Wi-Fi or cell coverage, you should be in great shape. So my little Samsung Galaxy S8 is a great tool. You can use all kinds of other things, laptops, and a lot of people use their iPads. And this is what my 4-screen system looks like. Again, very simple. Not too many things on the screen, because I can only look at so many things at a time. What you can see there is on the right screen bottom, I've got like 4 different receivers I'm listening to on VHF. So I'm listening to like 50.1125, 275, 260, and 313. So I can tell when there's activity on any of those things just using my SDRC, my SDR console to do it. You can see the amplifier is just above the, let's see, that would be on the left screen, on the right of the left. Yeah, the bottom left screen, top right is the, thank you for the pointer. that's my amplifier. And I have two different views of it. I have one which is like a long, you'll see that in a minute here. I think it's a slide for it. Over the bottom right there, you can see the bottom right on the right screen is a rotator control. It's got all the grid squares. So all I have to know is where the guy's grid square is, and I can just click on it and it'll put my rotator in that position. So again, it's not too sophisticated, but it's enough to operate pretty effectively your remote station. Node-RED, that's a great tool if you want to get into it. It's like it's a programming tool that has a lot of flexibility and APIs, and be able to wire all your different pieces of hardware together if you want. Dave is an expert on that. WT0DX, who's actually on the call, I think, and you'll get a chance to chat with him if you want after we get finished with the presentation. I'm sure he can answer a few more things for you, but you can look it up online. And the nice thing about it is, if someone has already developed an interface to an amplifier like I have, like the LA1K, I can send my flows diagram, which is like the program. There it is. I can send that to someone. I can just export it, put it in an email, and that person can download Node-RED and upload it into his software, and he'll have the same functionality that I do. And then he can customize it to whatever he wants. He can make a few more buttons on there or whatever. It's very simple to do it, and it has to be simple for me to be able to do it. It's not that. This is an example of the icons I've created with Dave's help, and then I created some other ones because I wanted to add a few things or change it. I find out that I don't really need all the operating information that's on the left-hand side there. That's one of my my icons, but I'm able to get by with a little bit of a screen there on the right, and that's what I usually use for when I'm operating. If I want to be able to do something with the amplifier, see how much current it's drawing, or whatever else, the ALC, I can use the other one, but they're interchangeable. And it's just a mouse click to bring them up. So everything's great. Here's an example of what a Flex 6600 and a SPE and a Step IR look like, courtesy of Nick W7NIK's station. And he's got his little rotator there. He just clicks on a country and away it goes. So you can see you can make these things pretty sophisticated.
Thanks, Paul. Let me talk for a few minutes about my remote station. I'm going to demonstrate it here shortly, so I won't spend a huge amount of time. So my remote station is located at a local ham's house here in the western suburbs of Denver, and he's graciously allowed me to set up my own equipment and operate. He's been at this location for 25 years, has an amazing antenna farm. I'm on I have antennas on his short tower, which is 90 feet. He has some other antennas on a 120-foot tower, which he lets us use during contests. So it's a great antenna farm. My equipment setup, I have an ICOM 7600. I have the Elecraft KPA 500 amp. I have their antenna tuner. Again, high gain rotator controller. I have an antenna switch. And also a Rig Blaster Pro, which I interface my audio for single sideband. And again, you'll see all this here in a few minutes. Also, Win 10 computer, I actually hand built mine, bought all the parts online, cost me about $300 or $400. And here's some of the software again that I run on that. I'm not going to talk too much about it because you'll see it here in a few minutes. At this location, the internet is via Comcast. I also have Comcast at my end. Again, a perfectly adequate connection. And as Paul said, we use Splashtop and AnyDesk, interchangeably as needed. And then I have Wi-Fi power controllers for the radio and computer. Here's kind of a wiring diagram. Again, you don't have to study it, but basically there's a control connection from every device that goes back to the computer. That's of course critical, or you wouldn't be able to run software to control the devices. And then I've got a couple of AC power controllers that control all the equipment. In the case of my amplifier, which is also running from 240, you can remotely turn it on and off. So that's what I do. I don't need to have a separate power switch for it. Someone asked me, by the way, on the last time we presented this, what do we do about disconnecting antennas? Okay. Well, I have the DX Engineering 8-to-1 switch, which is a form of disconnect. It's obviously not the same as actually physically disconnecting the antennas from all your equipment, and putting them in the corner of the room far away from the equipment. But we did put in, well, this station already had pretty extensive lightning protection built in and grounding system. And then we put in additional lightning arresters on all of the antennas for the remote operation. Here's what my setup looks like. On the left is my equipment setup. A lot of messy wires behind the scenes, but those are the basic pieces of equipment. At the top here, this is actually my computer, amplifier, antenna switch, antenna tuner, my antenna switch controller, power supply, rig blaster, the radio, and then I've got a little SDR that I also use that's sitting down there. Picture on the right is an example of how I have my two monitors set up. This picture was actually taken from my Evergreen home, but I have the same setup here at my new house. And just like Paul, I've operated from a variety of different locations, and it's always worked out very well for me. And I've done it with an iPad, or in my case, a HP, a notebook computer, and sometimes I'll have an external monitor if I want to have two screens on that computer. Let's talk a little bit about some remote operations. So back in 2019, we rented a vacation home in downtown Crested Butte. Here's a picture of the house there. And we were there. I was there for a month and operated remotely. Made hundreds of contacts. What was interesting was that the internet service to this house is the local DSL internet. So it's not great. However, it was perfectly fine for my remote operation, and I did not really suffer any obvious issues running with that fairly low capability internet connection. Paul came down. You saw the picture in the first slide. He came down for the VHF contest weekend, CQ Worldwide VHF contest weekend. And we operated our stations separately. So I operated my remote station and he operated his remote station. And we went head to head in the contest to see who could make more contacts. But we were sitting about 10 feet apart when we were doing that in the same rental home. And Paul, I swear, I didn't do anything to your computer the first 3 hours that it was misbehaving. I swear that's the case. But anyway, I beat him out by a few contacts at the end there. Let's talk a little bit about how we use my remote station. I mentioned that we use it in a multi-op configuration. Paul and I have run a couple of digital contests that way. The station operates literally as if you were sitting right in front of it. Okay, so it's very transparent. as Paul mentioned, using multiple remote desktop connections simultaneously, we're able to observe one another operating, and sometimes correct, stupid mistakes we're making in the middle of the night when we're a little tired. Plus, it gives us a chance to do a smooth handoff between one operator and the next. We just switch, who basically is controlling the mouse at their end. We made, in the recent ARRL RTTY roundup, we made over 1,000 contacts, a mixture of RTTY, FT8 and FT4, and we ended up in 4th place in the multi-single low power category. In the FT roundup that's held in December of 2020, we did very well in the Multiop situation. So I give a lot of credit to the antenna farm that we're on. I give some credit to the remote station that operates, and then Paul and I managed to struggle as operators and do pretty well. And actually, I think prefer multi-op contests or contesting, because I don't have the stamina anymore to go literally a full 24 hours or a full 48 hours. So this is a very nice way that Paul can operate for a few hours, then I operate for a few hours, then he operates for a few hours, and then one of us sleeps or whatever. And even one time I was in Florida and he was in Denver, so we had a nice 2-hour time difference that really helped us with that. So it's been a very pleasurable benefit of having a remote station that we can operate. Great, so we're kind of at the end here. There were 2 questions that I saw come in. One of them was a question about how many operators can operate at once. I think that was the question. I think we've sort of answered that you can't have multiple operators, sort of accessing the station at the same time. Obviously, it's one set of equipment, so you have to decide who's actually doing the control. Another question that came up was RFI. I assume that has to do with any RFI that is occurring within your station that might be, causing an issue with one of your connections.
Yeah, that was the question. I was wondering about how much hassle you went through as you got it set up, working through that.
Well, in my case, just about 0 hassle. In fact, ironically, I had more RFI issues when I had my station set up at my home in Evergreen than when I was set up at this other station. I think some of it was just this other station has matured over 25 years. Very nice grounding, very nice, switching. But I did not have to do any, I didn't have to pull out a whole box full of toroids and start, wrapping every cable around it. I think, Paul, I don't know if you've done a little bit of RFI mitigation, but I don't know if you've done a lot.
Yeah, well, most of my RFI issues were more with where my antenna was located, because my antenna is actually on the roof, approximately, I don't know, about 12 feet or 10 feet off the surface of the roof, and the shack is just below that. And so the front of my beam, when I'm pointing east, is actually right over my head, and probably not more than about 20 feet away. So you can imagine what happens when you run a kilowatt on 6 meters. Your antenna's right there. So the nice thing was, the biggest problem I had was not RF getting into the computers or any of the other equipment or into the audio circuits. The biggest problem was the noise that was coming from the computer. The computer itself generates noise, and these power supplies. So anyway, I plastered the inside of the power supply and everything else in the computer with these snap-on chokes that you can get from Amazon, very cheap, and then that quieted things down tremendously. Since then, I've bought a new computer, a better computer, and they're really quiet. So I didn't have to do as much mitigation, but I've never had an RF issue with the remote station. One of the questions people always ask me is like, what do I do for lightning? Well, where I'm located is basically in the city, so I don't have a lot of lightning hits around me, although there are a few big trees and a bunch of other buildings around me. But I have found that with the RF arresters that you can buy, if you're running a kilowatt on 6 meters, they don't work because it interprets the RF on 6 meters as a lightning hit, and then it just shorts out and it makes my amplifier go nuts. So you have to run like 500 watts or 300 watts or something with these things. They're okay on low bands. If you're on 40 meters or 80 meters, they don't pose a problem. But the best, I've looked at and I bought some of these ones that are supposedly good for VHF, but they're not really good for VHF with power. So I think
Yeah,
that's,
they're expecting like STL links and stuff like that in the 50 or 100 watt range on the good ones. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, thanks on that. I had a similar situation with, except, you know, I'm only running about 50 watt, only about 6 feet above my head. So probably about the same. And blowing things up would happen from time to time. I look forward to the new QTH having more room.
Yeah. So before we, great, thanks for that. Before we jump into the demo, I'm just going to flip through the appendix pages. Again, we're going to put a copy of this presentation up in the files section of the groups.io website. So you'll be able to access that tomorrow. But just to show you, I've got links for all the software that we talked about, a lot of links and hints on the hardware that you might want to use or look into. A bunch of websites that I've talked about, a bunch of other software tools, including links to Node-RED and CatSync, and then just a page specifically on Node-RED. Again, some more links that you might want to look at. And just I'll end it by saying this screenshot actually is the setup that I had on my very first remote station, which was at my son's house in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And a very simple set of software that I was running there, basically a rig control program. Had a little Arduino-based power switch so I could turn my remote antenna tuner on off. And then of course I was running WS-JTX. So let me switch over now to the remote station. Hang on a second. Okay, so you should now be seeing one of the monitors from my remote station, and give you a little tour here shortly. So this is the monitor that I typically have on the left-hand side, and then I can scroll across here and just show you what I would normally have on the right-hand side. So let me go back here, and I'll just point out a few things. So obviously this is the radio front panel. It's using Win4ICOM connected to my ICOM 7600. I have an antenna tuner, the Elecraft KAT 500 antenna tuner, and this is the little software interface that they provide for that. I have Elecraft KPA 500 amplifier, and this is the software interface that they provide for that. And then I have the 8-position DX engineering switch. And then the controller I got is from WT0DX, and this is his software application that lets you select antennas. And then on the lower left here, we have, I use a PST rotator as an interface to the rotator. And again, this is all a point and click operation. I scroll over to the right here, I have WS-JTX running FT8. I'm on 40 meters right now. And this is JT Alert, if you're familiar with that, which, you know, gives you some additional information. And then this is my logging program, Log4 OM it's called. And I did get on this morning earlier today. I got on 20 meters and boy, I got on FT8. The conditions were great today. I was here in Europe pretty much all day long on 20 meters. So I worked a bunch of stations. Probably the one that got me most excited was 9K2OW in Kuwait. It was nice to work that station. And I did work the famous VC3 vaccine station, which some of you may have seen on the air. Thank you to our Canadian friends for operating that station. And just after dinner here, I got on, when I switched over to 40 meters, I worked a couple stations just to make sure everything was operating properly. I worked VE1CNS and K4YT. So let me see if I can give you just a little real-time demo here. I'm going to actually pull the amplifier widget over here. And again, all of this software is running on the desktop of the computer that's sitting next to the equipment. Okay, I just want to reiterate that. What I have on my end is two monitors that show me everything as if I was sitting right in front of that computer. So let's put this into CQ only mode. I'm going to try and call someone that I see on here that has, let's see here. Let's try this one. Okay, so I'm transmitting now. I was kind of late in starting, so he probably won't hear me. But you can see, you know, sort of all the normal operation of the amplifier and the radio meters switching around and WSJTX doing its thing. Let's give it a second here. Oh, okay, sorry, he heard me. So he's calling me back and I'm sending him a report and we'll finish up the contact here and then we'll log it here. And again, this operates just as if I was sitting right in front of all the equipment. Very easy to operate. Also looks like I've been spotted by a whole lot of stations here. So we'll send our 73s. We'll hit the log button and then should show up over here. There we go. It's in my log book. So anyway, everything works the way it's supposed to work. And you know, again, very easy operation, just as if I was sitting in front of the equipment. So let me pause here and just ask if there's any specific questions, and then we'll maybe give Paul a chance to show off a few things.
Bill, this is Dave, WO2X. One thing I want to bring to your attention, in case you're not aware, there's a new version of JT Alert 2.50.0 that came out. One of the things is they have a separate calls window that you can size however big you want it. And it eliminates the 36 decode limit that you see in JT Alert.
Actually, I saw the announcements for that, Dave. Thanks a lot. I usually wait a few days, if not a week, before I load a major new version.
I'm a beta tester for it, and I've been using it for a while. So.
Okay, well, so I'm letting, you know, all of that withstanding, I'm just waiting to make sure that there isn't some giant thread about, you know, a memory leak or something wacky like that going on before I load it. But yes, looks like a very nice upgrade to that. I'm also, every time I start my logging program, it reminds me also that they released a new version last week. And I'm just, again, waiting a week or two to make sure there isn't, you know, something that gets discovered. But yeah, it's a great set of software for sure. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Paul, do you want to take over the screen control? I'll stop sharing and you can bring yours up, bring your station up if you want.
Yeah, sure enough. So let's see. I think this is my station. There, can you see the?
Yes.
You see the station? Okay. Okay. So this is very simple. There's not really a whole lot going on at 6 meters right now. But just to show again, it's pretty easy to start up. I just hit the hit the CQ button, I'm going to be setting even. I'm pointing down towards W0XR, and away she goes. There, you know, so this is all I have to do to get this thing to start up. You can see I'm running about 900 watts roughly, and on 6 meters, it automatically picks up what band I'm supposed to be on. And over on the right-hand side, you can see it, the amplifier knows what frequency I'm transmitting on, and it does the shift for me automatically. On the other screen, let's see if I can change this really quick. Well, it's transmitting. See if anybody comes back to me.
If they do, I'm going to be impressed. Maybe I should tune my radio to 6 meters and respond, huh?
Yeah.
Run in there and fire stuff up, Paul.
Yeah. Do you have any power down there? Let's see what's going on. Let's see if I can make this work. Or if I can figure out how do I unshare. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I just figured it. New share here. Let's see. See if this works. There we go. Can you see my other screen?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the other screen I have up here, and oops, daisy. We'll bring it back here somehow. Okay, so this is the HD Ham Radio Deluxe, which I love the screen. You know, these are all like the buttons I've got down here. I got more buttons up here for different bands. Like I said, this brings every button out on my radio that I don't normally see. So it makes it so much easier to operate your radio when you're using one of these CAT programs. And the other part of HDR is this rotator control, which I really love this thing because it, you know, I'll expand it for you here. You know, you can see all the different grids across the US, and all you have to do is just double click on it, and the beam just goes to where you want. Oh, there's there. Oh, I got WT0DX. Who the heck is that? Anyway, not giving me more. He's not very strong here. He's only about +11.
I think he's only running 5 watts though.
Oh, that's his problem. You know, those QRP stations. Yeah. Anyway, but that's how that works. It's very simple. Like I said, this is not rocket science. Over here, you can see my 4 receivers so that I can monitor when the band opens up on sideband. I can zip over to SSB or CW, and I've got the Q65 frequency in here on the other. So all I have to do is just change my WSJT configuration and click on the right receiver, and it just pops right over.
Paul, why don't you go back to the first screen and show that amazing contact that you just...
Amazing contacts. See if I can do that. Let's see if I can. I've never done this before. When you're switching monitors like this. Here we go. Did it happen?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I just clicked on it. Away it went. So there it is. I just have to push the OK, and I just logged it. That was pretty simple. So for anybody who wants to try this stuff, it's not that hard. Up here, I have this is the LA1K dashboard that Dave WT0DX helped me build, and by just clicking on one of the other icons, I can switch it over to make it bigger, and I can just pull it down. And you can see all the different things that I'm doing. And by just clicking on this little button here, I can switch from standby to operate. You can see the temperature of my amplifier right now is 39 degrees Celsius. So it's running very cool right now. And that was running about, what would I say, about 700 watts out, something like that. Anyway, that's the setup. Any questions?
Paul, how do you receive you have 4 receivers on your radio or your SDR? receive 4 at the same time?
Okay, so that's a good question. So this is SDR console. It's a free software, but it's extremely well written. And I have all kinds of different options here. One of the options is matrix. And so I can set up as many sub receivers, if you want to call them that, that I can switch over from one frequency to another frequency. I'll just pull the other receiver, the matrix over here for you, so you can see it. So this is just I did this very quickly, and you can just manage the frequency that each receiver sets up. So I've got basically 4 receivers running here at the same time, and then by simply clicking on one of the receivers, if I say select here, you see it switched it over to 275. And if I select over here, it brings me down to like 125, and so on and so forth. So all I have to do is just click on them, and it just moves me over to the other frequency.
Paul, is that
And you're-
only on the same band?
It depends on your SDR. Okay. In my case, my SDRs are a little different. Let me show you.
One other thing, Paul, is you're sending the audio for each of the receivers to the same place.
Correct. Yeah. See down here, I have a virtual audio cable running from this receiver over to the WSJT. Now, I can configure it so that I have a separate audio from each receiver, or I can have all 4 receivers going at the same time. So if I want to listen to, I don't know, different parts of,
But you can decode the 4 frequencies at the same time?
well, what I could do is I could create multiple instances of WSJT at the same time. Okay, so I can have 4 instances of that, and then have those 4 receivers feeding. One of them's going Q65, one of them's going MSK 144, and another one's going FT8, and maybe one's going FT4. And I can have all those running at the same time on my screen.
The other word for it is slices.
Slices like pizza.
Yeah, that's the vernacular used in the flex radio world primarily, but it's the same concept, which is you've got, in this case, 4 active receivers running from the same piece of the same SDR hardware. And of course, it works best maybe when you're in the same band on the same antenna, of course.
Now, and so if I want to change bands, or let's say I want to change SDR, I go over here and say stop. Okay, so it stops my receiver, and I go over here to select radio. And what comes up here is I have AirSpy and AirSpy HF Plus. Okay, and so if I click on HF Plus and hit start, and then of course the receiver is still thinking it's on 6 meters, so I basically have to just change the frequency. I have memories here. I don't know if I got 40 meters in here at all, but if I wanted to, I could just simply redial it in, or I can go over to my HDR console, and I'm going to click 40 meters here.
Might even be another session if there's enough interest, Paul.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, maybe SDRs is a good topic to bring up.
But it is, once you understand how to connect an SDR receiver to something like WSJTX or any other, coding device, once you understand the principles of how that's done, then you can create multiple pairs of receivers and decoders, which is a very, very cool thing to be able to do, particularly maybe during e-skip season or something else on 6 meters, where you want to monitor and decode, multiple different frequencies and perhaps different modes at the same time.
Yeah, so you can see how I switched over to 40 meters, and lots of activity on 40 tonight.
Do you have
So
the cat? You have the cat control set up between WSJTX and that SDRC.
Yeah, actually, what I'm using is a tool that Dave WO2X showed me. I think it was you, Dave, that brought up this program called VSPE, Virtual Serial Port
Emulator.
Emulator. There you go. Thank you, Dave. And it's a commercial piece of software, not very expensive. And the nice thing about it is it allows you to, I'll bring it up here on the screen so you guys can see what it looks like. Come on, that's okay. There we go. And you can see up here, I've got COM11, COM12. So right now, COM11 is actually on my HDR rate control. And and then I have a item called a splitter. So what I do is all the other programs listen in on COM13, and they get all the frequency information from the Ham Radio Deluxe. Now, if I change my WSJT frequency, it will automatically change it on HDR, and everything else will change. So what I'm saying is it synchronizes everything, so that if I change one frequency, it changes everything. So I don't have to keep worrying about which frequency I'm on. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Well, but you cannot receive 4 times or decode on the 4 screens. Maybe you can see the screen,
Rafa, let me stop you.
somebody's calling on
Rafa, hold on.
Yes.
Hold on. If it is possible to have 4 separate copies of WSJTX running, each one of the 4 copies of WSJTX listening to a different one of the receivers in SDRC. So you could have one listening on the FT8 frequency, one listening on the Q65 frequency, one listening on the MSK 441 frequency, all of them decoding their own digital modes.
One program and on
One copy of
WSJT only, the same time?
One radio, one SDR radio, one copy of SDRC with 4 receivers configured, and 4 copies of WSJTX, each one for a different mode.
You know, it's an interesting topic. I think it would be a good one that we might even want to have a presentation on to explain exactly how you would do that. Because, you know, you do have to understand and how things are configured and connected. So, Paul, it is something for us to think about in the future, to put maybe a full presentation together on, you know, multi-receiver decoding, if you will.
Yeah, I've actually got a couple of guys already lined up to do that, and may do that in maybe the first week of May or second week of May.
Yeah.
Good
That's
man,
it.
Paul.
Got to keep ahead of you guys.
But you have to make sure that they call you at least 3 hours before the meeting.
Yeah, I'll try to remember.
And send an SMS, yeah.
Further to the particular subject, and do you have audio on your remote, Paul? Do you listen to the audio most of the time, or?
Well,
When
Bill likes it. I kind of like without the audio because it doesn't make a lot of noise here in the shack. I can put my headphones on if I want. But
And that was the point I was going to make, is if you're doing the digital stuff, you don't need the audio.
You know, it's interesting. Even with the digital stuff, the reason I like the audio is because it reminds me when I'm receiving and when I'm transmitting. And in the heat of the battle, if you have multiple stations calling you and you're calling stations, if I don't have any sound, I sometimes don't, it doesn't register to me whether I'm receiving or transmitting. And we actually use two different techniques. Paul uses an application called
Remod.
Remod. Again, there's a link for Remod in the in the appendix. And it's a nice little standalone application. It's a client server two-way audio system that was designed specifically for ham radio. Comes out of Germany. I actually use an audio server that is part of my Win4ICOM software package. It has a built-in two-way audio server. So I typically use that because I'm lazy and it's sort of, it's right there. I've also used Remod and it works great too.
So they at each end you just say, I want to talk to this Windows source or this Windows output, whatever.
Exactly. You do have to think about the direction you're going and whether it's a microphone or a speaker source and all that stuff. But yeah, Paul's showing here how he's got his setup for his server, I assume. Is that the server?
This is the server side. You've got all these different, TCP server. You can define who the remote users are. In this case, myself, and which audio devices you want to use. In this case, I'm using my virtual audio cable coming from
SDRC.
the SDRC, right? And I'll transmit on. Let's see, a number of different. I have all these different things I can transmit on. It should be set up for.
Yeah, so it's very similar to kind of configuring WS-JTX. You need your microphone and your speaker, and you have to think about, again, for each direction you're going, what's the microphone and what's the speaker, right?
And also the push to talk. So when you want to be able to transmit on sideband, I have PTT control here where I define a COM port, a virtual COM port, and I have the delay and everything else I want to put in there. So that's really, really handy to have. And I got a cable that does the PTT, goes from my USB port directly to the back of my my ICOM. So it keys the transmitter when I hit my foot switch here.
Just a quick comment. That's essentially what the RSBA1 remote control, the server part does.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is free software, and all you have to do is buy a cable online.
Well, and I'll bet it's got better instrumentation than RSBA1 does.
I don't know.
So
RSBA1 is nasty.
So Rick, for everyone that uses RSBA1, I say try Win4ICOM.
I would agree with that. The one thing that is the main thing that is wrong with the RSBA1 panel, the thing that makes it look like the radio, is that it doesn't have a proxy port for software to be able to talk to the CIV connection at the same time as the RSBA1 is talking.
Yeah, the Win4ICOM configuration creates 6 virtual radios. So you can connect up to 6 devices or 6 sets of software through Win4ICOM, and each of them thinks it's the only thing talking to the radio.
That's one way.
Again, they're all synchronized, amongst each other. Paul brings up an interesting thing, which is the push to talk function or transmit function. Obviously with WS-JTX, that's controlled through the CAT software. When I'm contesting and I use N1MM, I create macros for transmit and receive. So I actually do my push to talk through software across the network. And it works just as well as, having like a foot switch or something else. So I have 2 function keys on my keyboard when I'm contesting. I push one to transmit and the other to go into receive. And so, again, there's a lot of little tricks and things that you learn, that accommodate the you know, all the features you like to have on your station when you're operating it remotely.
Yeah, one of the other things that you can do with this is you can also set up a remote receiver and an antenna. So let's say you're in an area that's a lot of noise, but you got a friend of yours who's got someplace out of the city and have a small antenna put up there. You can get one of these $200 computers and one of these $169 SDRs and hook the thing together and run this splashtop software or whatever you want, and you could put that into your system here so that WSJT is listening to that receiver instead of your receiver here, and that way it gives you the best of both worlds.
And if
Paul, on the refurb stuff, Walmart and Staples, I've had good luck with Staples. And also what I was wondering, on the various copies of WSJTX, do those have to be renamed?
you have to start WSJTX, your icon has to have a rig name as part of the starting screen, a starting string. So there is a little trick on how you start multiple copies of WSJTX. Yes, there is.
It's in the documentation.
It is.
So, yeah, and as Bill says, it's a thing you have to add on. You have a separate icon for each one, and it passes a parameter that says, I'm going to use this set of any files and so on.
Yeah, it sets up a separately configurable, you know, in terms of all your settings, radio control and everything else. It sets it up, you know, manages it separately when you start them with these different parameters in the start screen. And again, that's something we could cover on a future presentation.
If all else fails, read the instructions.
Yeah, sometimes that works, and sometimes after you read the instructions, you actually know what to do.
and just I just want to say a good thing about WSJTX's documentation. It's really good. It's one of the better ones, and especially if you have a clue about it has this in there, go look for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of the software that has just junk documentation.
Yeah.
This one's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lyle said you can have 24 slices.
Yeah. And Paul, you know, you probably have talked to Paul. You probably talked to Paul Newcomb.
Yeah.
He's done demos with, you know, a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool. Anything else? It's getting a little late here, even in Denver. Any other questions?
This has been great. Thank you.
Little late here.
Great job. Yeah, great presentation.
Well, we'll, as I said, Paul will post the video tomorrow, and I will also post to the website, the Groups.io website, a file of all these slides.
Yeah. If you got questions about Node-RED, Dave, W02X, right there, he'll be more than happy to answer you. And they also have a very good Group.io that you can join and
Yeah, in the links that are in the appendix here, there was a link to our Groups.io group for Node-RED, and I think we're up over 500 members now worldwide in that group. So
somebody has already written something for your equipment by now. Likely. All right, guys. Thanks very much, and sorry for the late start. I'll try to be more attentive next time and give Bill the the passcode.
Make sure I can log on.
Can I send you an alarm clock, Paul?
Yeah, that too. That'll help. Yeah.
You'll probably be receiving a number of interesting communications, Paul.
Yeah.
So.
There's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that, Paul. A clock alarm app.
Yeah, but he has to have his phone with him. That's the problem.
Okay, guys. Nothing.
See you later.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
All right, good night. Hi, Jim. Goodbye, Jim.